20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
We got a roll program.
Neil Armstrong reporting the roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on a proper heading.
We copy you down, Eagle. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground.
Okay, I'm going to leave that 1 foot up there and both hands down about the 4th rung up. There you go. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. We'll read the plaque that's on the front landing gear of this LEM. There's 2 hemispheres, one showing each of the 2 hemispheres of Earth. Underneath it says, "Here men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon, July 1969 AD. We came in peace for all mankind."
I guess you're about the only person around that doesn't have TV coverage of the scene.
That's all right, I don't mind a bit. How is the quality of the TV?
Oh, it's beautiful, Mike. It really is.
Oh, geez, that's great. Is the lighting halfway decent?
Yes, indeed. They've got the flag up now, and you can see the stars and stripes.
Wow. If that does not inspire you, you are at the wrong event. You don't choose your passions. Your passions choose you. When I was 5 years old, I watched what you just rewatched, and it had a huge impact on me. And it hasn't changed. None of that passion has gone away. This is me in high school, and I want to highlight this quote: "The Earth is finite, and if the world economy and population is to keep expanding, space is the only way to go." I still believe that. By the way, this is also my version of a misspent youth. Guess what the best planet is in this solar system? It's easy to know the answer to that question. We've sent robotic probes like this one to all the planets in our solar system now. Some of them have been flybys, but we've examined them all. Earth is the best planet. It is not close. This one is really good. Don't even get me started on Venus. Look at Earth. Earth is incredible. Jim Lovell, one of my real heroes, on Apollo 8, while he was circling around the moon, he did something amazing. He put his thumb out, and he realized with his thumb at arm's length, he could cover the whole Earth. Everything he'd ever known, he could cover with his thumb. And he said something amazing. The old saying, "I hope I go to heaven when I die." He said, "I realized at that moment, you go to heaven when you're born. Earth is heaven." Carl Sagan, so poetic, on that blue dot, that's where everyone you know and everyone you ever heard of, and every human being who ever lived out their lives. A very small stage in a great cosmic arena. For all of human history, the Earth has felt big to us. And actually, in a really correct sense, it has been big. Humanity has been small. That's not true anymore. The Earth is no longer big. Humanity is big. It seems big to us, but it's finite. And there's something that we have to do. we have to realize that there are immediate problems, things that we have to work on, and we are working on those things. They're urgent. I'm talking about poverty, hunger, homelessness, pollution, overfishing in the oceans. This is a very long list of urgent, immediate problems. And we need to work on those things urgently, in the here and now. But there are also long-range problems. And we need to work on those too. And they take a long time to solve. You can't wait until the long-range problems are urgent to work on them. We can do both. We can work on the here and now, and we can get started on the long-range problems. A very fundamental long-range problem is that we will run out of energy on Earth. This is just arithmetic. It's going to happen. As animals, humans use 97 watts of power. That's our metabolic rate as animals. But as members of the developed world, we use 10,000 watts of power. And we get a lot of benefit from it. We live in an era of dynamism and growth. You live better lives than your grandparents did, and your grandparents lived better lives than their grandparents did. And a big part of that is the abundance of energy that we've been able to harvest and use to our benefit. There are many good things that happen when we use energy. When you go to the hospital, you're using a lot of energy. All the medical equipment that was manufactured for you, transportation, the kinds of entertainments that we enjoy, the medications that we use, all of these things demand a tremendous amount of energy. We don't want to stop using energy. But it is unsustainable. Let me walk you through this. The historic rate of compounding of global energy usage is 3% a year. Now, 3% a year doesn't sound like very much, but over many years, the power of compounding is so extreme. 3% annual compounding is the equivalent of doubling human energy use every 25 years. If you take global energy use today, you can power everything by covering Nevada in solar cells. Now that seems challenging, but it also seems possible. And it is mostly desert anyway. But in just a couple of hundred years, at that 3% historic compounding rate, we'll have to cover the entire surface of the Earth in solar cells. Now that's not going to happen. That's a very impractical solution. We can be sure it won't work. So what can we do? Well, one thing we can do is focus on efficiency. And that is a good idea. The problem with it is it's already assumed. We've always been, as we've been growing our energy usage 3% a year for centuries, we have been focusing on efficiency. Let me give you some examples. 200 years ago, you had to work 84 hours to afford 1 hour of artificial light. Today, you have to work 1.5 seconds to afford an hour of artificial light. We've moved from candles to oil lamps to incandescent bulbs to LEDs and gotten tremendous efficiency gains. Another example, transportation, air transport. In the 50 years, the half a century of commercial aviation, we've seen a 4x efficiency gain. Half a century ago, it took 109 gallons of fuel to fly one person across the country. Today, in a modern 787, it takes only 24 gallons of fuel to fly a person across the country. It's an incredible improvement. It's very dramatic. How about computation? We've seen a 1 trillion times increase in the efficiency of computation. The UNIVAC could do 15 calculations with 1 kilowatt second of energy. A modern processor can do 17 trillion calculations with 1 kilowatt second of energy. Now, what happens when we get very efficient? We use more of these things. Artificial light has gotten very inexpensive, so we use a lot of it. Air transport has gotten very inexpensive, so we use a lot of it. Computation has gotten very inexpensive, so we even have Snapchat. We have an ever-increasing demand for energy. We will become increasingly efficient, and even in the face of that, we will be using more and more energy. That 3% compound growth rate already assumes great efficiency gains in the future. What happens when unlimited demand meets finite resources? The answer is incredibly simple: rationing. That's the path that we would be on. And that path does not lead, it would lead for the first time to where your grandchildren and their grandchildren would have worse lives than you. That's a bad path. There's good news. The good news is that if we move out into the solar system, for all practical purposes, we have unlimited resources. So, we get to choose. Do we want stasis and rationing, or do we want dynamism and growth? This is an easy choice. We know what we want, we just have to get busy. If we're out in the solar system, we can have 1 trillion humans in the solar system, which means we'd have 1,000 Mozarts and 1,000 Einsteins. This would be an incredible civilization. What could this future look like? Where would 1 trillion humans live? Well, it's very interesting. Somebody named Jerry O'Neill, a physics professor, looked at this question very carefully, and he asked a very precise question that nobody had ever asked before. And it was, is a planetary surface the best place for humans to expand into the solar system? And he and his students set to work on answering that question, and they came to a very surprising, for them, counterintuitive answer. No. Why not? Well, they came up with a bunch of problems. One is that other planetary surfaces aren't that big. You're talking about maybe a doubling at best. It's not that much. They're a long way away. Round trip times to Mars are on the order of years. And launch opportunities to Mars are only once every 22 months, which is a very significant logistics problem. And last, you're far enough away that you're not going to be able to do real-time communications with Earth. You're going to be limited by speed of light lag. You're certainly, the kids sitting here, probably some of the adults too, don't even think about playing Fortnite with somebody on Earth. That is not going to work. Most fundamentally, these other planetary surfaces do not have and cannot have Earth normal gravity. You're going to be stuck with whatever gravitational field they have. In the case of Mars, that's 1/3 g. So, instead, what O'Neill and his students came up with was the idea of manufactured worlds. rotated to create artificial gravity with centrifugal force. These are very large structures, miles on end, and they hold 1 million people or more each. Here's the International Space Station for scale. This is a very different kind of space colony. Let's take a look at what they might look like inside. High-speed transport, agricultural areas. We added a little drone there. Cities in the background. Some of them would be more recreational. They don't all have to have the same gravity. You could have a recreational one that keeps 0G so that you can go flying with your own wings. Some would be national parks. These are really pleasant places to live. Some of these O'Neill colonies might choose to replicate Earth cities. They might pick historical cities and mimic them in some way. There'd be whole new kinds of architecture. These are ideal climates. These are shirt sleeve environments. This is Maui on its best day all year long. No rain, no storms, no earthquakes. What does the architecture even look like when it no longer has its primary purpose of shelter? We'll find out. But these are beautiful. People are going to want to live here. And they can be close to Earth so that you can return, which is important because people are going to want to return to Earth. They're not going to want to leave Earth forever. They'll also be really easy to go between. The amount of energy required to go between these O'Neill colonies, from one to another, to visit friends, to visit family, to visit one that's a recreational area, very, very low energy needs to transport, and quickly. It's a day trip. This is a very interesting video clip I'm going to show you. This is Professor O'Neill, the guy who, with his students, came up with the idea of what's now called O'Neill colonies, and the famous science fiction author Isaac Asimov being interviewed about these colonies. And Asimov gets asked a very good question, which is, did anybody in science fiction ever predict this? And if not, why not? And he has a very good answer. Watch this.
Did you anticipate anything like this in any of your science fiction?
Nobody did really, because we've all been planet chauvinists. We've all believed people should live on the surface of a planet, of a world. I've had colonies on the moon, so have 100 other science fiction writers. The closest I came to a manufactured world in free space was to suggest that we go out to the asteroid belt and hollow out the asteroids and make ships out of them. It never occurred to me to bring the material from the asteroids in towards the Earth, where conditions are pleasanter, and build the worlds there.
Planetary chauvinists. All right. If we build this vision, these O'Neill colonies, where does it take us? What does it mean for Earth? Earth ends up zoned residential and light industry. It'll be a beautiful place to live. It'll be a beautiful place to visit. It'll be a beautiful place to go to college and to do some light industry. But heavy industry and all the polluting industry, all the things that are damaging our planet, those will be done off Earth. We get to have both. We get to preserve this unique gem of a planet which is completely irreplaceable. There is no plan B. We have to save this planet. And we shouldn't give up a future for our grandchildren's grandchildren of dynamism and growth. We can have both. Who is going to do this work? Not me. These kids in the front rows, you guys are going to do this, and your children are going to do this. This is going to take a long time. This is a big vision. And what you're going to do is you're going to build whole industries. There are going to be thousands of future companies doing this work. A whole ecosystem of entrepreneurial activity unleashed, creative people coming up with new ideas about how to use space. But those companies, those entrepreneurial companies, cannot exist today. It's impossible. And the reason is the price of admission to do interesting things in space right now is just too high. Because there's no infrastructure. Let me tell you a story about Amazon. In 1994, I started Amazon. All of the heavy lifting infrastructure needed for Amazon to exist was already in place. We did not have to build a transportation system to deliver packages. It existed already. If we had had to build that, it would have been billions of dollars in capital. But it was there. It was called the US Postal Service, and Deutsche Post, and Royal Mail, and UPS, and FedEx. We got to stand on top of that infrastructure. The same thing with payment system. Did we have to invent a payment system and roll that out? That would have been billions of dollars in many decades. But no, it already existed. It was called the credit card. Did we have to deploy computers? No, they were already in most homes. Mostly to play games, but they were there. That infrastructure already existed. Did we have to build a telecom network? That would have been billions of dollars. But we didn't. It was in place mostly to make long-distance phone calls and built by global telecom carriers like AT&T and their equivalents around the world. Infrastructure lets entrepreneurs do amazing things. So the kids here and your children and their grandchildren, you're going to build those O'Neill colonies. This generation's job, my generation's job, is to build the infrastructure so that you'll be able to. We're going to build a road to space. And then amazing things will happen. Then you'll see entrepreneurial creativity. Then you'll have space entrepreneurs start a company in their dorm room. That can't happen today. So how really are we going to build O'Neill colonies? Nobody knows. I don't know. Nobody in this audience knows. That's for future generations to figure out the details. But what we can know is that there are certain gates we have to go through, certain precursors, certain prerequisites. If we don't do these, we will never get there. And it's really nice to know what those things are because you can work on them with great confidence that they're going to be useful. However the details of that future vision evolve, these things are going to be essential. What are the two gates? First, we must have a radical reduction in launch cost. Launches are just simply too expensive today. And second, we have to use in-space resources. Earth has a very powerful gravitational field. And lifting all of our resources off of Earth just isn't going to work. We need to be able to use the resources that are already in space. Okay. Here's New Shepard. The Blue Origin team has already made amazing progress on reusable launch vehicles. I'm incredibly proud of the work that this team has done. We now have 10 consecutive landings. We've used 2 boosters. Both have flown 5 times. Almost no refurbishment between flights. That's how you reduce launch cost. You have to have reusable vehicles. Today, what we do is we use launch vehicles one time and throw them away. You also can't have, kind of fake reusability where you bring the vehicle back, but then do a lot of refurbishment. That also turns out to be very expensive. We're going to be flying humans here in New Shepard this year. That's incredibly exciting. I want to talk to you about some of the architectural decisions that we made when we built New Shepard. New Shepard is a suborbital vehicle designed for space tourism. And we made, for that mission, some very curious technology decisions. First of all, New Shepard is powered by liquid hydrogen. It is the highest performing rocket fuel, but it's also the most difficult to work with. and it's not needed for a suborbital mission. So why did we choose it? Because we knew we were going to need it for the next stage, and we wanted to get practice with that hardest to use but highest performing propellant. Same thing with vertical landing. Why did we choose vertical landing for New Shepard? It's very counterintuitive, actually. There are other landing mechanisms that would have worked at this scale. In fact, vertical landing gets easier the bigger the vehicle. Vertical landing is like balancing a broom on your fingertip. You can balance a broom, but try balancing a pencil. It's very challenging. The moment of inertia of the pencil is too small. So the great thing about vertical landing is it scales up really well. The bigger the vehicle, the easier it is. And right from the start, we wanted to build a human-rated system so that we would be forced to think clearly about safety, reliability, escape systems, all the things that we knew we would need to have practice with in order to build our next generation of vehicle. So it's all about practice. I can't wait to start sending humans up in New Shepard later this year. It's a big deal. Thank you. Let's talk about New Glenn. New Glenn is New Shepard's big brother. New Glenn is big enough that New Shepard will fit in the payload bay of New Glenn. It's 3.9 million pounds of thrust. It's a very large vehicle. I get asked a very interesting question from time to time that I like and I enjoy and I answer and I play with. And the question is, Jeff, what's going to change over the next 10 years? And that's a fun dinner conversation. But I'll tell you, there's an even more important question that I almost never get asked. And that is, what's not going to change over the next 10 years? And the reason that question is so important is you can build your plans around those things. So at Amazon, I know for a fact customers are going to want low prices 10 years from now. That's not going to change. Customers are going to want fast delivery. They're going to want big selection. So all the energy we put into those things will continue to pay dividends. It is impossible to imagine a customer coming to me 10 years from now and saying, Jeff, I love Amazon. I just wish you delivered a little more slowly. Or I love Amazon. I just wish the prices were a little higher. It's not going to happen. And so when you can figure out the things that are going to remain true under almost all circumstances, then you can put energy into them. We know what those things are for New Glenn. It's cost, reliability, and on-time launches. Right now, each one of those things needs improvement before we can go to this next phase of really going out into the solar system. And I know these things are stable in time. We are not going to have a New Glenn customer 10 years come to us and say, Jeff, I wish the rocket were just, failed a little more often. Jeff, I wish that it was more expensive, or that you were late on my launch dates. By the way, the availability and launching on time is really a big problem in the industry, underappreciated by most people who aren't directly in the industry. It really snarls things up and costs the payload customers a lot of money, all the delays. So these things won't change. We're going to put energy into them. The whole vehicle is designed around those three things. Here's a video to show you a little bit of what New Glenn will look like. You can see the plume is a little bluish because of it's powered by liquefied natural gas as the fuel, very inexpensive. 3.9 million pounds of liftoff thrust. You can see big strakes on the end. That's to help the booster fly back to the landing ship. You're going to see separation. That's the second stage. It's powered by 2 of our BE3U engines. It's the same engine that's in New Shepard, the same liquid hydrogen engine in New Shepard, but an upper stage variant of it. and we'll deploy the payload. The first stage is designed to be reused 25 times. It has a 7-meter fairing, which is very large. And that's important because a lot of payloads end up being volume constrained rather than mass constrained. It's a big vehicle. It'll lift 45 metric tons to LEO and 13 metric tons to GTO, to geosynchronous transfer orbit. Here it is landing on the ship. The ship is underway when the vehicle lands. Why is the ship underway? Because we want really good weather availability. We're designing the system to be able to fly and launch payloads if the Orlando airport is open. And we can't tell the customer, it looks good here, it's a nice day here at Cape Canaveral, but where we need to land our booster, we have heavy sea states. So with the ship that's underway, we can use fin stabilizers, stabilize that platform, and operate this vehicle even in very heavy sea states. And it's designed for human rating right from the very beginning. We'll fly it in 2021 for the first time. So reusability is absolutely the key to radically reducing launch costs. People sometimes wonder how expensive is the fuel? Is the fuel a problem? Liquefied natural gas is very inexpensive. That's even though there's millions of pounds of propellant on New Glenn, the cost to fuel New Glenn with fuel and oxidizer is less than $1 million. That is not a significant cost in the scheme of things. The reason that launching things into orbit is so expensive today is because you throw the hardware away. It's like driving your car to the mall and then throwing it away after one trip. It's going to make trips to the mall very expensive. The second gate that I know we must go through, I'm sure of it, in-space resources. We have to use them. And we have a gift. We were given a gift, this nearby body called the moon. We know a lot now about the moon that we didn't know back in the Apollo days, or even really just 20 years ago. One of the most important things we know about the moon today is that there's water there. It's in the form of ice. It's in the permanently shadowed craters on the poles of the moon. And water is an incredibly valuable resource. You can use electrolysis to break down water into hydrogen and oxygen, and you have propellants. Another great thing about the moon, another reason it's a gift, it's nearby. It's 3 days away. And you don't have constraints on launch, the 22 months kind of thing that you have with Mars. You can go to the moon just about any time you want. And of great importance for building large objects in space, the moon has 6 times less gravity than Earth. When you get resources from the moon, you can get them into free space at very low cost. It takes 24 times less energy to lift a pound off the moon than it does to lift a pound off the Earth. That is a huge lever. But guess what? The moon also needs infrastructure. Let me show you something. This is Blue Moon. We've been working on this lander for 3 years. It's a very large lander. It'll soft land in precise way 3.6 metric tons onto the lunar surface. The stretch tank variant of it will soft land 6.5 metric tons onto the lunar surface. Let me give you a little tour. The deck is designed to be a very simple interface so that a great variety of payloads can be placed onto the top deck and secured. And the davit system, which is inspired by naval systems, you can see it over here, is what's used to lower things off of the deck onto the surface of the moon. And the davits can be customized for the particular payloads. We have here as an example a very large rover. And by the way, even though that's a large rover, this vehicle can land 4 of them simultaneously on the surface of the moon. And if you go ahead and go back up on the deck again, let me show you a couple more things up there, some features. On the left-hand side, you can see our star tracker, so that this vehicle can autonomously navigate in space. There it is. On the right-hand side, you'll see an optical communication system that gives us gigabit bandwidth back to Earth. It's a laser that transmits data back to Earth. We also have X-band for 10 megabit radio. Let's keep going with the tour. Liquid hydrogen. Why are we using liquid hydrogen? This is not how Apollo did it. Why are we using liquid hydrogen as our fuel? A couple of reasons. One, it's very high performance, and so that helps a lot when you're landing on the moon. That's that after you've got to carry all of your propellant to the moon. Second reason we're using liquid hydrogen is because ultimately we're going to be able to get hydrogen from that water on the moon and be able to refuel these vehicles on the surface of the moon and use them. So liquid hydrogen is an excellent choice for fuel for the moon. And we use it 3 ways on this vehicle. And it's very interesting. The liquid hydrogen, of course, is the fuel for the descent engine, so it powers the descent. But we also use the boil-off, so when liquid hydrogen, when heat seeps in through the tank walls, and liquid hydrogen gasifies a little bit, it boils. And that very cold gas is passed around the liquid oxygen tanks to prevent the liquid oxygen from boiling off. So that's the second use of the liquid hydrogen. And then after it has cooled the liquid oxygen tanks, it is pushed into an accumulator where it then powers hydrogen fuel cells. And we chose hydrogen fuel cells for this vehicle rather than solar cells because we want to be able to survive the lunar night, which you can't do with solar cells. The lunar night is 2 weeks long, and it gets very cold. And also the fuel cells provide a lot of power. It's 2.5 kilowatts of power, which would be a very large solar array. Landing gear, they stow in an upward configuration so they can fit into the 7-meter payload bay. They deploy. They're designed, the very wide splay angle is designed so that we can land on an incline on the moon of up to 15 degrees, which is a very big incline. Be able to do that safely. You can't see them, they're underneath here, but we have flash LiDAR, so we can do terrain mapping. There's no GPS on the moon. So if you want to land precisely, and we can land within 75 feet of our target, when you want to land precisely, what you do is you use features on the moon to navigate. Now that we have mapped the entire moon in great detail, we can use those pre-existing maps to tell the system, it's a machine learning system, to tell the system what it should be looking for in terms of craters and other features, and it navigates relative to that. It uses the actual terrain of the moon as guideposts. This is an incredible vehicle, and it's going to the moon. I have something else I'd like to show you. And Marina, would you mind coming up? Thank you, Marina. Good. This is for me. What is it?
It's for our robotics team.
Your robotics team. Thank you. I'm going to keep that in my pocket. All right, go ahead. This is a hard problem that we haven't yet, that needs still to be solved. This is very interesting. We've been working on this for 3 years. Thank you, Marina. This is the BE-7 engine. It's liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen. We're going to hot fire it for the first time this summer, which is the only reason we can do that is because we've been working on it for 3 years. Most of it is printed. It has 10,000 pounds of thrust, and it has very deep throttling capability. That's critical for a lunar descent engine, because this lander, when it's fully loaded with fuel, weighs 33,000 pounds. When it's done its descent burn, and it's just about to land, and the fuel is almost gone, it weighs less than 7,000 pounds. And so to provide the right amount of force on the vehicle with the engine, you need to be able to throttle it way down as the vehicle is getting lighter because it's burning its own fuel. Now, these problems that we're talking about, the kinds of things I'm talking about, we've solved them all already for New Shepard. It's very similar. The landing gear, liquid hydrogen tanks, all of those things are solved. Even the autonomous descent and so on. But we need the new engine, and that's what this is. And it's very exciting. The team has made incredible progress. We have an incredible propulsion team. I'm very proud of them. I can't wait to see it. 453 seconds of specific impulse, a very high-performing engine, and I can't wait for that first hot fire. We'll distribute video. Uh-oh, Bob laughed.
Yeah, I did. No, I'm good.
We will.
Good.
There you go. I'm going to show you a mission sim. This is not a cartoon. This is real physics here. We've been simulating this for a long time. You'll note a couple of things. One thing is when this vehicle, there are payload bays here on the sides, and when this vehicle is in orbit around the moon, as a kind of extra mission, a bonus mission, it can launch small satellites into orbit around the moon so that we can do certain kinds of science. You see it happening here. So we're deploying a number of small satellites before we do our landing. You're going to see a set of burns that will take us down to the surface. The primary burn is 6 minutes long. This BE-7 engine will be firing for 6 minutes. It's a very long burn. We verticalize about 1 kilometer above the surface. You can see that happening now. A very precise landing, again, using those flash lidars to detect surface features and using those for navigation. Now we're going to watch as the Davit system, which is inspired by a naval system, deploys a rover. Look at those long shadows. The shadows are always long on the poles of the moon. Wow. There's a lot of interesting science to be done on the moon, especially on the poles. And we have formed a science advisory board. They're with us here today. Would you guys mind standing up just for 1 second to be recognized? Give these guys a hand. Thank you. We appreciate it very much. The wisdom and advice from this group is going to make sure that the science gets done right and that we get the most bang for our buck doing that. Thank you. We also have already a bunch of customers for Blue Moon, many of whom are in the audience. They're going to be deploying science missions to the moon as well. People are very excited about this capability to soft land their cargo, their rovers, their science experiments onto the surface of the moon in a precise way. There is no capability to do that today. Let's think about some of the other things we can put on top of this. Here's a picture of a pressurized human rover. And it's really interesting, when you can land precisely, you can configure missions that use multiple landings. So you send the rover down first, lower it onto the surface using the Davit system, make sure it's all in good working order, and then send the astronauts. And speaking of sending the astronauts, here's a stretch tank version of what you see behind you. This is the stretch tank version of Blue Moon, which can soft land 6.5 metric tons onto the lunar surface. And this has an ascent vehicle on top. I'll tell you one little thing that I think, just a little tiny anecdote. Do you see these landing gear? These pads, the foot pads. When I first saw the drawings of this a long time ago, I was like, my images of landers were all formed by the Apollo lander. And I was sure that those landing pads were too small. And I asked about that. And the answer is these are not too small. The ones on the lunar Apollo lander are too big because we were very worried about how soft the lunar surface was. And it's just an example of how much more we know today. So these will work just fine, don't worry. Vice President Pence just recently said, it's the stated policy of this administration and the United States of America to return American astronauts to the moon within the next 5 years. I love this. It's the right thing to do. And for those of you doing the arithmetic at home, that's 2024. And we can help meet that timeline, but only because we started 3 years ago. It's time to go back to the moon, this time to stay. And what I'm laying out here today is obviously a multi-generation vision. This is not going to get done by any one generation. And one of the things that we have to do is inspire those future generations. And so today, I'm announcing that Blue Origin is founding the Club for the Future, whose mission is to inspire young people to build the future of life in space. You see seated in front of you the inaugural founding members of the Club for the Future. Thank you, guys. And we're going to do a series of activities focused on K through 12. And the first one I love, which is we're going to ask K through 12 students to send us postcards with their dreams of the future. And then we're going to send them to space in New Shepard and bring them back and mail them back to you. And today I had the opportunity to meet with this group of kids just ahead of this presentation. Went over there about 3 o'clock while they were making their postcards. And they're amazing. I saw several amazing ones. I really liked the one where the girl told me that on hers she had written the name of her crush at school that her mother doesn't yet know. But I guess she assumes it's okay. Once we actually fly to space, by the time she gets this back, probably be okay. Mom can know at that point. Thought it was a very good plan. So there's a lot of, by the way, if the kids I talked to earlier, these kids sitting in the front row, if they are representative of the current generation, we are in good shape. Teachers who want to participate in this with their kids, just come to the earlclubforfuture.org, and it has all the instructions that you need. Please make no mistake about this. Earth is the best planet. It isn't close. We do need to protect it. It's essential. It's our job. We're now big enough to hurt this planet. We have to use the resources of space. We must have a future for our grandchildren and their grandchildren of dynamism. We cannot let them fall prey to stasis and rationing. And it's this generation's job to build that road to space so that the future generations can unleash their creativity. When that is possible, when the infrastructure is in place, just as it was for me in 1994 to start Amazon, when we have that infrastructure in place for the future space entrepreneurs, you will see amazing things happen. And it will happen fast. I guarantee it. People are so creative once they're unleashed. And if this generation builds the road to space, builds that infrastructure, we will get to see thousands of future entrepreneurs building a real space industry. And I want to inspire those future space entrepreneurs. I want you to think about this. This vision sounds very big, and it is. None of this is easy. All of it is hard. But I want to inspire you, and so think about this. Big things start small.